Once there was a man named Edward who had kept a wooden trunk in his garage for 28 years and had never opened it. Not once. The trunk had belonged to his father, Henry, who had kept it in his own garage before him. When Henry died, he left Edward two things: a small farmhouse outside town and the trunk. He said nothing about what was inside it. He only said, "Keep it safe." So Edward kept it safe. He moved it carefully whenever he swept out the garage. He carried it himself whenever the house needed repairs. When his kids were small, they sometimes asked what was in the trunk, and Edward always said the same thing: "I don't know." This was the truth. They thought he was joking. They had learned after the first few years not to ask about the trunk. His wife had her own feelings about a trunk that sat in the garage for decades without explanation, but she kept them to herself, which is the wisdom of a good marriage. The trunk was not very large. A man could carry it under one arm, but it was heavy. Edward had never worked out what could make a trunk that size so heavy. He had thought about this many times over 28 years, mostly late at night, when he could not sleep, and he could feel the weight of it out in the garage, sitting there in the dark, being heavy. One evening, Edward's oldest friend, Walt, came by to visit. They sat on the porch and drank beer and watched the sun go down over the cornfields. Walt had known Edward since they were boys. He had been at Henry's funeral. He remembered the trunk. "You still got it?" Walt asked. "Out in the garage," said Edward. "You ever open it?" "No." Walt looked at his beer. "Edward, your dad's been gone 28 years. "I know," said Edward. "He said keep it safe. He didn't say keep it shut forever." Edward said nothing more. This was true. He had thought about this also many times. Keep it safe and keep it shut were different instructions. He had simply always done both. "What if there's nothing in it?" said Walt. "What if it's full of old tools?" "Then it's full of old tools," said Edward. "Then you've been hauling tools around your garage for 28 years. "Yep," said Edward. They sat for a while. A truck rumbled down the county road and disappeared past the tree line. "What if there's something valuable in there?" said Walt. "Then it's valuable," said Edward. "You're the most patient man I've ever known," said Walt, or the most scared. Never been sure which. Edward looked out at the fields. He thought about this. "Maybe both," he said. Walt headed home after dark. Edward went inside. His wife was already asleep. He got into bed. He lay there a while, looking at the ceiling. Then he got up, grabbed a flashlight, and went out to the garage to pull the trunk out from behind the old lawnmower. He set it on the kitchen table. He looked at it a long time. It was plain wood, dark with age, with a simple brass latch that had never been locked, just closed. For 28 years, just closed. He put his hand on the latch. He thought about his father. He thought about a man who kept a trunk in the garage and never explained it, and then died without explaining it. He thought about what kind of man does that and why, and what he might have been thinking. He opened the trunk. Inside, there was a smaller box. It was a different wood, lighter colored with careful carvings on the lid, wheat stalks and a meadowlark. Someone had made it with a great deal of patience and time. Edward lifted it out. It was lighter than the outer trunk. He opened it. Inside there was a letter, folded many times. Underneath the letter, wrapped in an old handkerchief, were 3 things: a small pocket compass, brass and worn smooth, a woman's wedding band, plain gold, very simple, and a photograph, old and yellowed at the edges, of a young woman standing in front of a clapboard farmhouse Edward didn't recognize, smiling at whoever was holding the camera. Edward didn't recognize the woman. He unfolded the letter. The writing was his father's. He hadn't seen his father's handwriting in 28 years, and looking at it now felt strange, like hearing a voice from another room. The letter was short. These belonged to your mother, Ruth. She died before you were old enough to remember her, and I never spoke of her because I found it too hard. The compass she carried west with her family when she was 16. The ring was her mother's before her. The photograph was taken the year she married me, outside the house her father built. I should have shown you these things a long time ago. I'm sorry I didn't. Keep them safe and tell your children about her. She was not afraid of anything. Edward sat at the table a long time. He read the letter again. He looked at the photograph. He looked at the woman standing in front of the house, smiling. Ruth, his mother. She was not afraid of anything. He sat there until the flashlight started to dim. In the morning, his wife found him at the table with the trunk open in front of him. She looked at the letter, the compass, the ring, the photograph. She looked at Edward. Your mother, she said. Yeah, said Edward. Her name was Ruth. His wife picked up the photograph carefully and looked at it a long time. Then she set it down gently. She's got a kind face, she said. Yeah, said Edward. His wife made coffee. They sat together at the table, and Edward told her everything in the letter, which wasn't very much, and everything he now found himself wondering about his mother, which was a great deal. Where was that farmhouse? What her voice sounded like? Whether she really wasn't afraid of anything, or whether his father had written that because it was the kindest thing he could think of to say about her. That afternoon, Edward's youngest daughter came by with her 2 kids. Edward called them all to the table. He showed them the photograph. He told them her name was Ruth. He told them she had carried the compass west when she was 16. He told them what his father had written at the end of the letter. His granddaughter, who was 7, picked up the compass and held it carefully in both hands. She carried this when she was little, she said. When she was young, said Edward. Not so little, 16. That's little, said his granddaughter. Edward looked at the compass in his granddaughter's hands, brass and worn smooth, carried a long way by a young woman who was not afraid of anything, into a life that Edward knew almost nothing about. Yeah, he said. I suppose it is. He let his granddaughter hold the compass for the rest of the afternoon. She carried it around the house and the yard and showed it to her brother, and then came back and set it carefully on the table in front of Edward before she left. Thank you, Grandpa, she said. Thank you, said Edward. After they left, Edward put everything back in the smaller box. He put the smaller box back in the trunk. He closed the latch. Then he set the trunk on the mantel above the fireplace, where everyone could see it, and went to start dinner. His wife watched him set it up there. She said nothing. But that evening, when they sat down to eat, she looked at the trunk on the mantel and then at Edward and smiled. The small, particular smile of a woman who has been waiting a long time for something and has finally seen it happen. Edward saw the smile. He said nothing, but he understood it completely.